How does a close game turn into a 22-point defeat? Injuries, mistakes, and schematic deficiencies. Diving into it all right now on Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Commanders. I am David Harrison, your guy on the ground, covering the Washington Commanders for WUSA 9, and right here with you 5 days a week. And you can also find me writing about the Commanders for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com, and you can find me on X at DHarrison82. I want to thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen or view of the day. Everydayers, those of you who come through for every single episode, a special thank you to you for coming through for yet another one. Coming up on today's episode, we're going to talk about what coaches and players are talking about after an embarrassing loss to the Dallas Cowboys. We're going to look at some Week 7 grades and trends, but we're going to start it all off with 3 specific moments that the Washington Commanders lost control of the game in Dallas in Week 7. All that coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And it's all brought to you by FanDuel, where right now new customers can bet just $5. And if that bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use anywhere else on the app. So we did our immediate response after the game. I flew home from Dallas, had a lot of just tired thoughts, rewatched the game, dove into some tape, listened to some interviews. Dan Quinn sat down with us as a media group on Zoom on Monday, and then Tuesday night, Chick Hernandez of WUSA 9 had his normal sit down with Dan one-on-one. I go to that sit down every week because I write the associated digital news written story that goes along with the interview. So I just got back from that, sit down here at my desk to record basically our day after episode, which I know it's Tuesday as I'm recording this. You know, a lot of you are going to hear this on Wednesday, but really it's the day after, just because we finally have all the comments from Dan Quinn and got to hear everything on Tuesday night as we were delayed a little bit with travel and all that stuff. So we'll very quickly switch over to a mailbag on Wednesday again, and then cross over Thursday with the guys from Locked On Chiefs, and we'll be on fully to Chiefs week. But first thing we got to do is really start to kind of dissect what happened in Week 7 and figure out where things go from here, at least try to from our foxhole, our viewpoint. And so that kind of brought me to 3 questions that I wanted to try to answer as best as possible, because if you know what happened, then hopefully you can prevent it from happening again, right? So what happened at the end of the first half? So obviously just a massive defensive failure across all levels of the defense in one way, shape, or another. The Washington Commanders score at near the end of the first half, I should say, 35 seconds or so left on the clock before the Dallas Cowboys get their hands on the ball, right? 45 seconds when it's scored, but after the clock runs down, the kickoff return, all that kind of stuff. Basically about 35 seconds left for Dak Prescott and the Cowboys offense. And now their lead is trimmed to 5. The Commanders are getting the ball coming out of halftime. They've got momentum, and things actually look to the point where I'm getting ready to send out a tweet from AT&T Stadium that says, man, given everything that's going on, entering the halftime locker room only down 5 points, getting the ball back to start the second half actually feels pretty good. We've kind of been here before. Well, in that time period, the Dallas Cowboys go down and they end up scoring a touchdown of their own, extend their lead back out. And that was just kind of the beginning of the end, right? I mean, the game hadn't been going great up to that point anyway, but from that point on, it just went from bad to worse with every single snap, it kind of seemed. So 4 plays, 35 seconds. First play of the Dallas Cowboys ensuing drive is a sack. Great start for the Washington Commanders. Von Miller, Jacob Martin, they end up splitting the sack. They both get credit for that. So obviously the defense didn't fail there. In fact, there you almost expect the Dallas Cowboys to let the clock run out, just hit the halftime locker room with the lead, but they don't. They take a timeout. Very bold move from them. But, after hitting a 74-yard touchdown pass to CD Lamb, you just kind of have the feeling like this Cowboys offense could really strike at any given time if this Commanders defense doesn't prevent them from doing so. Very next play, that's exactly what happened. 44-yard pass from Dak Prescott to George Pickens. No pressure from the defensive line up front. Linebackers really, can't put a whole lot of blame on them for this. But Marshon Lattimore in phase, in position, just gets beat deep, doesn't get his head around, doesn't make the play. And listen, there's conversations you have about defensive backs where you say, well, the guy was in position, that's good and all that stuff. And certainly that is A+, but when you're a veteran with the experience Marshon Lattimore has when you're a veteran brought in for the reason you're brought in and you have the reputation you have, like the thing about reputation is you then have to live up to it. That's kind of the downside, if you want to call it that, to having this reputation as one of the best corners in the league or a shutdown corner, things like that, is you then have to prove time and time again that you actually are that guy, or else people are going to start talking about you like you're no longer that guy, which is, of course, exactly what has been happening. And now it's just only ramped up even more after this game. Because again, you're in position, but you don't make the play. You don't get your head around. You don't do all those things. A 44-yard pass. And right then and there, basically, the Dallas Cowboys are essentially in field goal range with Brandon Aubrey, who's just got the biggest leg in the world. It's almost like a Madden created kicker type of leg. Anyway, play number 3 is then a 33-yard run by Javonte Williams. So you give up the 44-yard pass and you immediately come up. And again, we talked about it. No pressure up front. D-line gets a negative on there. Linebackers, you can't really put any blame on them. But here, you get failure on all 3 sides, right? The defensive line gets pushed off the line of scrimmage. The linebackers either over pursue or just get beaten on the edge. No security there. And the DBs take poor angles. They miss tackles. And Javonte Williams nearly scores a touchdown on that very play, which in some ways maybe would have been a blessing in disguise because then Jayden Daniels has more time. But instead, it takes another play, and Dak Prescott finds Jake Ferguson, his tight end, 2 yards into the end zone. No pressure from the D-line. Linebackers lost tight end coverage over the middle on the tight end, and the DBs obviously didn't help out any. Again, it's red zone, so you're all kind of combined in there. So the failure is shared by a little bit of everybody, and it erases that Commander score, essentially nullifies that score you had at the end of the half, takes away any of the momentum. 27-15, Dallas Cowboys leading at the half. DQ about the situation in the moment said, quote, "Words cannot explain. I was hot," end quote. So that's question number 1. Where did that momentum, what happened in the end of the first half? And you look at the systematic failure, no pressure up front, no coverage help from the linebackers in the situations where it could come, or no run defense support from the linebackers, no edge setting, and DBs, again, in place, not making a play. You got to complete the play. You got to finish all those things. So how do you prevent those kinds of things from happening? Well, again, the good news is at least schematically, you have guys in position to make plays. Now the players, and then this is what players will tell you too, they've got to go out there and actually make the plays. Question number 2, why did Jayden Daniels completely kill the Washington Commanders' chances at any kind of comeback? Again, the touchdown at the end of the half, extends it back out to a 2-score lead, kind of kills any hope of that anyway, but you come back in the third quarter, full 2 quarters left to play in the game, and then you have a promising drive starting off the second half, and Jayden Daniels gets injured. In the process of getting injured, he also fumbles, but where he fumbles, where the injury takes place, is really kind of the worst part of this thing. Because again, you're inside the Dallas Cowboys 40. You're down 27-15, but it looks like you're about to get that score right back on offense. It's not complimentary football because the defense just gave it up, but there was a stretch there where the Commanders defense was actually kind of holding the Cowboys offense at bay. So it's kind of like, okay, if we can get this touchdown back, let's fix these issues that happened on the end of half drive, and let's just, get them the ball back with the 1-score lead again. They had converted a 3rd and 10 for a 15-yard gain to Chris Moore, moving the ball effectively after halftime, which is great. And then, basically disaster happens. Jayden Daniels gets the ball knocked out of his hand. He gets sacked and he hurts his hamstring. Again, the news from Dan Quinn isn't terrible, not like a long-term hamstring situation, but also not committal to the fact that Jayden Daniels will actually get to play this week, Monday Night Football against Kansas City Chiefs. Thankfully, you do have the extra day, so we'll see if that can happen or that can help. Coming right off of that, the Cowboys score a touchdown after the fumble recovery, make it 34-15. Now you're doubled up as an offense. Marcus Mariota comes in, and on his first drive, he too is moving the ball. Jayden Daniels fumbles and gets hurt at the Dallas 39. At the Dallas 38, on the next possession, Marcus Mariota trying to make a play for his team. It's 3rd down, getting pressured, scrambles to his left, throws late across his body to the right side for Jeremy McNichols, and he's intercepted by Daron Bland. We've seen this show before. Daron Bland takes the interception all the way back to the house, and boom, just like that, the Washington Commanders, in the span of less than a full quarter's time, go from 5 points down and getting the ball to down 41-15 with 2 turnovers on consecutive possessions and your starting quarterback injured. And just like that, the Washington Commanders just lost any opportunity to come back in this game. Marcus Mariota of the play said, quote, "Trying to make a play, give us a spark. Ultimately, it didn't turn out the way I wanted it to," end quote. The flow of the game just got completely interrupted. And from there, it was just, what was the final score going to be? It ends up being 44-22. But, what happened in that situation is chaos ensues, right? There's a little bit of chaos, especially coming off that 44-yard pass. So you give up the 44-yard pass, that's one thing. But you give up that 33-yard run right after that, it just tells me you've got a defense that's just discombobulated. That's probably likely, again, expecting pass. But just because you're expecting pass doesn't mean you can't be caught flat-footed against the run, just out of flux, right? How did Dallas' statistically terrible defense shut down the offense? Well, Matt Eberflus came out and dramatically changed his game plan from everything he had done before. The Dallas Cowboys entered the week 31st, 32nd in points per yard allowed, and a league low 7.8% use of man coverage. They'd used man coverage 47.5% against the Washington Commanders. Asked after the game why, they basically said this just felt like a game where you should do that. Quote unquote, or was what they said, read between the lines, basically said, we didn't think the receivers could beat us in man coverage. Essentially, they can't run away from us. And unfortunately, for the most part, they were right, because outside of a couple of shot plays, Chris Moore had one, Jalen Lane had a big one. Really, the Commanders receivers were unable to do a whole heck of a lot when they did. Jayden Daniels was so untrusting of his eyes that he missed some open receivers in some opportunities. It was just a great time for the Cowboys to dial up a man coverage, go completely against their trend. And it just kind of truly shows you the value of truly understanding who your opponent is, scouting against them, and using their weaknesses against them. So that is, one, it's a lesson in what opponents will do to you and what they think of you. Two, it's a lesson in maybe we need to do a little bit more of that. Identify their weakness and use it against them, because not a lot of that happened in this game from a Washington Commanders perspective. So understanding how the collapse happened leads directly to evaluating who performed well and who should shoulder some of the blame, not all of it, because, of course, it's not on one person or even five individuals for the blowout. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Cody Rourke from Locked On Broncos, and this episode is brought to you by Peloton. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton Cross-Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. This is Peloton's most advanced equipment yet, giving you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, or you're cross-training with your favorite instructors like Alex Toussaint. It's training reimagined to make your workout more personal. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with features that help you plan, stay motivated, and hit peak performance. You can let yourself run, lift, flex, and go, while Peloton handles all the rest. Plus, Peloton IQ provides real-time strength coaching, tracking your progress and suggesting weights that challenge you so you can get stronger. Plus, the new movement tracking camera, it counts your reps and corrects your form in real time, making sure every rep is safer and smarter. So let yourself run, lift, flex, push, and go. Explore the new Peloton Cross-Training Tread Plus at onepeloton.com.
Today's episode of Locked On Commanders is also brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who want to do more than simply move. We just broke down some critical moments and scheme changes that decided the Week 7 game between the Washington Commanders and the Dallas Cowboys. The kind of details that coaches honestly obsess over. Mazda brings this same intention to how they craft every model, from footwork to breath work. Athletes sweat all the details just like Mazda sweats the details in their vehicles. You can feel that Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. It just feels premium, like a perfectly executed game plan. And speaking of execution, Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, earning more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else as of August 2025. Like the players strive for perfection, Mazda sweats every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. So jump in your favorite Mazda and move and be moved. Daron Payne had a career performance in a lot of different ways. He's been having quite the season himself. Definitely one of the lone bright spots on the defense that has struggled to find any type of consistency. And I feel like if this defense was doing just even a little bit better, he'd be getting a whole lot more attention from it. But he's not getting anywhere near the amount of attention. And he tops our list, however, of players that significantly performed better than the team overall performed. So the best of Week 7, we're going to start with Daron Payne. Again, absolutely game record performance, even though the game was not wrecked for the Dallas Cowboys. 90.8 Pro Football Focus grade, which is great. Forced a safety, or got a safety, got a sack, 2 batted passes, 3 passes defensed, including 2 on back-to-back plays. Absolutely dominated Dallas's interior for the majority of the game. So Daron Payne, absolutely one of the best at week 7. Defensive end Jacob Martin stepped up after the Dorrance Armstrong injury took their best pass rusher out, gave him an A grade. From what I was looking at, 7 pressures, got a share of the safety play, was in there in the backfield. Again, Daron Payne first to the action, but Jacob Martin certainly getting in the dance a little bit. I think he certainly earned more playing time, and to be quite honest with you, the injury to Dorrance Armstrong going to basically kind of force more playing time. Wide receiver depth, I think that Chris Moore and Jalen Lane need a little bit of love here, provided some big plays, multiple explosive catches, despite the fact that they're obviously both backups. Chris Moore is a veteran kind of practice squad active roster kind of guy who bounces back and forth. Really the number 4 receiver on this team, if you want to think about it, now playing as the number 1 because of the guys that are out. Jalen Lane, rookie 5th or 6th receiver on the depth chart, if you think about it. And he basically stepped up to become the second most impressive, second most impactful receiver of the game. Did have a big drop early in the game. That was unfortunate, but ultimately did pretty well stepping up. The worst of week 7, I love him, man, but quarterback Marcus Mariota, the pick 6, basically just a dagger in the heart. You know what I mean? And again, the game was already kind of slipping away. The injury to Jayden Daniels, the fumble, the touchdown the Cowboys scored off that, turnover, all that kind of stuff. But you're moving the ball, you're making some plays. You just got to be smarter than that. Marcus is smarter than that, right? But 37.4 overall PFF grade is pretty accurate for what went on. And it's just, look, there's a possibility they need Marcus to step up in Kansas City. So obviously he's got to move on from that mistake, pretty quickly to give his team a chance to win in week 8. Definitely need a win in week 8. Do not want to go on a 3-game losing streak coming back home against the Seattle Seahawks and the Detroit Lions. Cornerback Marshon Lattimore, we've talked pretty extensively between the live show after the game and this show even earlier on. 30 overall coverage grade, was repeatedly beaten, 2 defensive pass interference penalties, just kind of completely fell apart in this one. Even took out Quan Martin in one play. And in that play alone, honestly, of all the plays that were made, first of all, I think that DPI early in the game really shouldn't have been called, but it is what it is. But the play, the 74-yard touchdown CeeDee Lamb, like Marshon wasn't to blame for that play. We'll get into that here in just a minute. But the angle he takes on that play is just really weird to me because he goes over the top of the play to try to essentially field the interception, like receive it almost like you're fielding a punt, which is really weird to me. You got to know, Dak is throwing it to a receiver, right? So to sit back and think you're just going to sit back and wait for the ball is just kind of weird. To not see CeeDee Lamb and the Marshon that I've watched, during his time in the NFC South while I was covering a team in the NFC South, the Marshon Lattimore I watched at Ohio State would absolutely attack that ball. Like you're going up to high point it, find it, high point it, or you're going out there to put a shoulder in CeeDee Lamb. And to be quite honest with you, I'd rather Marshon Lattimore, go out there and clean CeeDee Lamb and potentially get a flag for, unnecessary roughness. I mean, if you do it right, you're not going to get a flag anyway. But even if you got that flag, don't be wrong, we'd all be kind of criticizing him anyway. But, 2 paths of reality possible. Would you rather get criticized for trying to field a pass as a punt and running into your own teammate in the process, or being aggressive and drawing a flag for being aggressive? I think you'd rather draw the flag for being aggressive. Offensive tackle Josh Conerly Jr., not a great game for him. He's still a rookie, but look, four pressures allowed, gave up a sack. Just not great in pass blocking. A pretty decent step back for him overall. But, just that's part of the process of developing. Quan Martin, he's the one that gave up the 74-yard touchdown. Look, if you follow me on X, you might remember after that play I put out there, that looks to me like they were in cover 3. And again, from the broadcast tape, it did look like they were in cover 3. Went back, watched the all 22. Definitely looks to me like they were in cover 2. Looks like Quan Martin is supposed to be deep on one side, and he basically just goes too wide, is just drawn over too far to the boundary in his zone while CeeDee Lamb is running through the middle of the field. Doesn't see it in time. Dak actually kind of gave him an opportunity to get back in the play with throw trajectory. But then Marshon Lattimore taking him out of the pursuit just kind of killed anything. So a pretty big coverage bust there from Quan Martin. Of course, he ends up off the field at the end of the game as well. And then overall, just the team discipline, just a total collapse here. 11 penalties, 118 yards. Chris Paul said, quote, "This one really stinks. We're all pretty frustrated," end quote. Yeah, that tracks. Trending. Guys that are trending down. Quarterback health, obviously trending down. Bobby Wagner, his first poor game in a grade for me in this one, really was not able to do much against the run. stood out pretty well. Marshon Lattimore, obviously. Josh Conerly Jr., obviously. Run defense. Third straight poor rushing defense performance by this team. Allowed 4.9 yards per carry. Just no edge. They have no edge setting on this team. With Dorance Armstrong injured, I don't think it's going to get any better. Trending up, defensive tackle Daron Payne continues to play really well, and Jacob Martin, I think he stepped up pretty well after Dorance Armstrong got hurt. So those are some of the individual highs and the lows, but coupled with the breakdowns in the game, obviously things did not go well. What was in the minds of the coaches and the players, or at least one player, after the game? We'll get into that coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we're doing that today thanks to our friends over at FanDuel. The NFL season is rolling along, and FanDuel has an offer that you don't want to miss, because right now, new customers, you can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets. That's right. You pick a bet, you put down $5. If it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use anywhere on the app. We just went through the best and the worst from the Dallas Cowboys game. Daron Payne's trending up, but guys like Lattimore and Conerly starting to trend down. And it makes predicting the next week's outcome a little bit tougher, especially if you're just kind of trying to be that fan, that faithful guy or gal who just thinks that the Commanders can pull this thing out. It makes it a little bit hard when you see performances like that. FanDuel lets you put your insights to use, however, no matter how you do it. Maybe you bet the under on the Commanders' points scored until the offense proves you wrong, or you take the over on opponent quarterback passing yards, since the secondary obviously continues to struggle. You can even build a parlay around Daron Payne getting a sack or whatever you want to do. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com today to download the FanDuel app and get started. Post-game podiums and even day after interviews with head coach Dan Quinn reveals frustration, admissions of failure, and a clear sense that some significant mirror checking needs to happen for the Washington Commanders. Are three quotes coming out of the game. We're going to start with head coach Dan Quinn. This one actually comes from his Monday presser with the media on Zoom. And he basically goes into talking about how he shared a message with the Washington Commanders players about their meetings and their interactions with Navy SEAL friends of Dan Quinn's, talking about diving or sailing without GPS, with no landmarks. You're going out there, trying to just navigate your way through the water wherever you are. And he said that the SEALs basically shared with the team, there's three things you have to know. You have to know where you are, where you're going, and where you need to get to. Those are the three things you have to know. And just, a few degrees off here or there can really, really throw you off. And then he kind of expands it and says, his slogan, doing hard, S-word, doing hard stuff with good people. He says it's not just a slogan. It's not just a rah thing. It's real life. And it's really what they're about to go through, because they're in the hard stuff, quote unquote, and they need to get the job done. Like, this is what it's all about. Now you're about to find out who the good people are and who they're not. The focus needs to be sharp and all that stuff. They just got to dig out of it, basically, is DQ's point there. And I like the analogy, you know what I mean? Because I've never been in the water doing this, right? But been in land navigation situations. And yeah, man, if you're 1 degree off on your path, on your azimuth, while you're trying to navigate out there in any hostile environment, it can throw you off a lot more than I think people realize. So whether it's the little things, whether it's the big things, I think honestly a lot of this is just the little things. Getting outside the edge, getting outside your block, doing all these things, securing a block, finishing a block, not just being in, running fast with the guy down the field, but getting your hand up early, getting your eyes back, doing all these kinds of things. Look, nobody says that's easy to do. If it's easy to do, football players, NFL players wouldn't get paid millions of dollars, and they wouldn't have to work so hard at it and all these things. But this is what you signed up for. This is what you're there to do. So I like the analogy. I think it fits because clearly this team right now is kind of out in the middle of the water, the ocean, the river, the creek, the lake, and they don't really have a direction. So they got to figure it out. Dan Quinn asked to kind of clarify a little bit of that with Chick Hernandez on Tuesday afternoon when we were there. Was also asked, well, do you kind of know who your team is right now? And he said he didn't. And I think that's a really crappy place for a head coach to be at the end of October, is not knowing who your team is right now, not knowing what your team is. You know what they want and what it wants to be, but it just hasn't proven that it is. Speaking of Daron Payne, he was asked in the locker room about the loss. He said, quote, shoot, it is embarrassing. Honestly, we're a way better team than what we're putting on tape nowadays. We just got to go get back to it, end quote. And Daron is always short of words. Good games, bad games. He's always just kind of quick to the point. And so I'm going to add a little bit to it, not as like an insult to Daron or like, no, you're not saying the right thing. But it's not just getting back to it. It's about attacking deficiencies, right? Like you have to go watch the tape, find out like this is what's wrong. Everybody's got to be really honest. Like, hey, you number so-and-so, you suck at setting the edge right now. Okay, I suck at setting the edge right now. How do we get better at setting the edge right now? Is it that person who sucks needs to suck less and it's possible that they suck less? Or is it that somebody else needs to step in? And again, I'm not saying suck as in like trying to be disrespectful, as I'm not saying name, because I'm not saying that this guy or that guy sucks. But that's what it takes. That's what it takes when you're in this type of a business is you can't, the more you cater to feelings, the more you cater to ego, the less you really get to the heart of the problem. And again, this has nothing to do, like Daron is on the right track. I'm just adding my own little flavor to it, right? Quote number 3 is going to come from quarterback Dak Prescott. After the game, was asked about his success against Washington and if it was a different defense than he's used to. He said, quote, I guess it was similar. Haven't played them with the new DQ, Joe Witt, and the personnel they have on the team, but it was fun. I was confident with what I was seeing when you play them. Here's the thing that really got to me. Even with the new coaches, that's a group that I've played against every day for 3 or 4 years or so, understanding what they're going to do and what they're going to try to do. End quote. He went on a little bit. That's the part I really wanted to focus in on is that group I've played against every day for 3 or 4 years or so. When Dan Quinn came in and got the job with the Washington Commanders, his biggest message was you can't do things the way you did them before. And I understand that his defense and his ability got him a new head coaching opportunity in Dallas. But I think that spirit has to continue because for Dak Prescott, remember, Dak didn't play against the Commanders last year. So this was, like he said, this was his first time playing against the Dan Quinn, Joe Witt Jr. Washington Commanders defense. And he walks out of the press conference, into the press conference and says, that's the defense I practiced against for 3 or 4 years. That tells you that message of you can't just copy paste things is not making it to the defensive scheme. Whether that's Joe Witt, whether that's Dan Quinn, whether it's just both of them not realizing like, hey, maybe we think we put a little bit, like maybe we thought we reintroduced the hot dog, but really we just put a different mustard on it, but it's the same old hot dog. Like whatever it is, to me, that's got to be a wake-up call answer. Because it's not, I don't think it's meant as a slight by Dak Prescott, right? Because he kind of comes in, right? Like, oh, it was kind of similar. Haven't really seen him before. But then his mouth tells the truth his brain was trying not to say. Every day for 3 or 4 years or so, I played against them. Because no, you didn't. But that tells you how familiar that defense was to him. And that is a problem. Because if your defense is the same as it was 3 or 4 years ago, everybody has not just a year of tape on, they've got years of tape. And as you lose some of these other dynamic players, you don't typically get more creative. You typically get less creative. So the Washington Commanders, there's some soul searching that needs to happen, not just from the player perspective, not just from the locker room, but from the schematics and from the coaches. And I think that quote really kind of just steers it all in there. That's going to do it for today's episode, guys. Next time on Locked On Commanders, we've got a mailbag episode. So if you've got questions or comments or topics that you'd like to submit for that, all you got to do is become an insider, help impact the way the show is created on these specific episodes. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Become an insider today. Not only do you get to do that, but you're going to get text from me, information before anybody else, sometimes information that never makes it to public lights. We have some pregame and postgame Zoom conferences. Actually, I'm just now realizing I never did a postgame Zoom after the Cowboys game. Insiders, I greatly apologize to you for that. Now for your second listen, get a double dose of Locked On NFL. Find out what the national media is thinking about Washington and every other team. Wednesday afternoon, I am on Locked On NFL with Tony Wiggins, so make sure you come through and check that out as well. Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you're listening to today's podcast. To the everydayers, I see you every day. I appreciate you every day, and I thank you again for coming through yet again today. To everybody, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind. We'll see you again real soon right here on Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.